The Northern Territory of Australia covers 1.35 million square kilometers. That's larger than France, Germany, and the United Kingdom combined. And almost nobody lives there. Fewer than 250,000 people spread across a landmass that size. The population density works out to roughly 0.17 people per square kilometer. For comparison, Monaco packs about 26,000 people into a single square kilometer. Northern Australia is, statistically, one of the emptiest inhabited regions on the planet. But that emptiness is a lie. This is not a quiet place. It is one of the most densely dangerous ecosystems on Earth, layered with predators that don't announce themselves, plants that leave scars for decades, and weather systems that can erase a city overnight. Officially, this region has hosted the most catastrophic natural disaster in Australian history, holds one of the highest concentrations of saltwater crocodiles on the planet, and contains land so sacred that even the people who own it are not permitted to enter parts of it without ceremonial rite. And underneath all of it is something almost nobody talks about: the oldest continuous human culture on Earth, roughly 65,000 years old, that learned to survive here when the rest of humanity hadn't even left Africa yet. Today, we're going through 11 reasons Northern Australia might be the most quietly terrifying place a person can stand on. Not haunted house terrifying, real terrifying. The kind backed by data, autopsy reports, and search and rescue statistics. Let's start with the sky, because in this part of the world, the sky is the first thing that will try to kill you. The city that vanished in one night. Darwin is the capital of the Northern Territory, and by raw statistics, it is Australia's most disaster-prone city per capita. On the night of December 24 to 25, 1974, Cyclone Tracy made landfall directly over Darwin. It happened on Christmas Eve, while most of the city was asleep, exchanging gifts, winding down for the holiday. Recorded wind speeds reached 217 kilometers per hour before the measuring instrument physically broke apart. Some later estimates place the true peak gusts higher than 240. To put that in perspective, that's faster than a Formula One car at full throttle on a straightaway, except this wasn't a single object moving. It was the entire atmosphere, for hours, over an entire city. In a matter of hours, Cyclone Tracy destroyed around 70% of Darwin's buildings. Roughly 90% of homes were left uninhabitable. Of the city's 47,000 residents, more than 30,000 had to be evacuated by military aircraft because the roads and the airport itself were unusable. There was no functioning ground infrastructure left to move people any other way. For a period of days, Darwin effectively stopped existing as a functioning city. Entire suburbs were reduced to concrete slabs and twisted rebar. And here's the detail that should unsettle you more than the storm itself. This wasn't a freak event. Darwin sits inside one of the most active cyclone-forming regions on the planet. Every wet season, from roughly November through April, is a live threat window. Locals don't treat cyclone drills as an abstraction, the way people in temperate cities treat fire drills. Evacuation routes are memorized, the way other people memorize a daily commute. Emergency kits stay packed year-round. The city was rebuilt within a few years, and people moved back in almost immediately, fully aware that the ocean off their coast can do this again and, statistically, eventually will. There's a quieter footnote buried in Darwin's history too, one most tourists never hear about. During the Second World War, in February 1942, Darwin Harbor was hit by a Japanese air raid that dropped more bomb tonnage than the attack on Pearl Harbor just weeks earlier. Several vessels sank in the harbor that day and were never fully recovered. Their hulls are still down there, now functioning as artificial reefs, coral slowly consuming the metal frame by frame over 80 years. History and geology fused together, sitting quietly under the water of a city that has already survived one apocalypse from the sky and one from the air. Darwin, in other words, is a city that has been leveled twice in living memory, once by nature, once by war, and rebuilt itself both times, as if daring the next disaster to try again. Before we go further, drop a comment right now telling us where you're watching this from and what time it is for you at this exact moment. We want to see how many countries and time zones this video reaches by the time we're done. Type it in, then let's keep going, because the next threat doesn't come from the sky. It comes from the water. And it's already watching you, the predator that thinks. The saltwater crocodile is the largest living reptile on Earth. Adults can reach 7 meters in length and weigh up to a metric ton. That's a full ton of muscle, bone, and bite force. And it has existed in something close to its current form since before the extinction of the dinosaurs. It survived an asteroid impact that wiped out roughly 75% of life on the planet. Whatever design flaw killed the dinosaurs, this animal simply didn't have it. Across northern Australia, saltwater crocodiles inhabit essentially every river, every swamp, every brackish estuary. Current population estimates put their numbers at around 100,000 individuals in the Northern Territory alone. A recovery from near-extinction levels in the 1970s, when hunting had pushed the species down to only a few thousand animals. Protection laws reversed that collapse almost too well, and they are not confined to rivers. Saltwater crocodiles have been documented hundreds of kilometers out into open ocean, crossing entire straits between islands. They turn up in places where, statistically, they shouldn't be at all. Here's what makes them genuinely frightening rather than just large. You often can't see them coming. A saltwater crocodile can hold its breath and remain motionless underwater for up to 2 hours. It can lie at the bottom of a river, completely still, watching a person swim, with only its eyes and nostrils breaking the surface, or not even that much. Every body of water in this region carries warning signage. Tourists occasionally ignore it, assuming the warnings are for someone else, somewhere more remote. It rarely ends well. But the detail that actually unsettles wildlife researchers isn't the size or the ambush tactics, it's the behavior. Saltwater crocodiles don't appear to hunt on pure instinct alone. Field researchers have observed individuals watching a stretch of riverbank for days before making a single move, learning the routine of prey animals, including humans, and waiting for the exact moment those patterns repeat. Rangers in some regions have documented crocodiles that seem to recognize the schedule of specific fishing boats, positioning themselves near known bait-cleaning spots hours before the boats even arrive. This is not blind aggression, it is patient, observational predation from an animal whose brain hasn't meaningfully changed in tens of millions of years. And it isn't the only ancient predator in these waters. Northern Australia's coastal wetlands also host some of the highest densities of venomous snake species on the continent, including a relative of the inland taipan considered, drop for drop, among the most toxic land snakes known to science. Most of them will avoid a human on sight, retreating rather than confronting. The problem is you rarely see them before you're already close enough for it not to matter. The invisible killer in the water. If the crocodile is the visible danger of northern Australia's water, the box jellyfish is the invisible one. The species times Chironex fleckeri, times commonly called the sea wasp, is widely considered the most venomous marine animal known to science. A single specimen carries enough venom to cause severe, potentially fatal harm to dozens of people. Survivors have described the sting as feeling like being branded with red-hot metal along every centimeter of contact. In extreme, untreated cases, cardiac arrest can occur within minutes of exposure, sometimes before a victim can even make it back to shore. The truly disturbing part is how hard it is to see one. The bell of the sea wasp is roughly the size of a basketball, translucent, almost glass-like in clear water. Its tentacles can trail up to 3 meters behind it, nearly invisible against sunlight scattering across the surface. It isn't aggressive by nature. It doesn't hunt people. It simply drifts with the current, and if a swimmer happens to cross its path, The jellyfish has no way of distinguishing a human leg from a fish. Box jellyfish season in northern Australia typically runs from roughly October through May. During this window, many beaches are closed to swimmers entirely, and stinger nets go up around the few that stay open. Locals largely avoid the open ocean regardless of official warnings, preferring pools and netted enclosures even in the peak of the tropical heat. But the sea wasp isn't even the more insidious threat. A separate, much smaller jellyfish, barely the size of a thumbnail, causes something called Irukandji syndrome. Its sting can initially feel minor, almost unnoticeable, easy to mistake for a light brush against seaweed. Then, roughly 20 to 40 minutes later, severe pain sets in without warning. Blood pressure can spike to dangerous levels. Victims report a feeling of impending doom that doctors have learned to treat as a genuine diagnostic symptom, not just anxiety. The body essentially goes into crisis well after the person believed the danger had already passed. Medical intervention is required immediately once symptoms begin, and hospitals across the northern coast keep dedicated Irukandji protocols on hand during peak season. Two separate creatures, both nearly invisible, both living in water that looks, to any untrained eye, completely calm and completely safe. The plant that remembers you. Not every danger in northern Australia swims or has teeth. Some of it just grows out of the ground. Dendrocnide moroides, times known locally as the Gympie-Gympie, or stinging tree, is a soft-leaved shrub that grows up to 3 meters tall in the rainforest zones stretching across the tropical north. From a distance, it looks completely ordinary, almost decorative, the kind of plant you'd expect bordering someone's backyard or lining a garden path. Every leaf and stem is covered in microscopic silica hairs, and a single brush against one can trigger pain that, according to documented case reports, has lasted for years. The hairs are almost impossible to fully remove from skin, even with specialized tools like hair removal wax strips used in clinical settings, and the pain doesn't fade with time the way most injuries do. It can flare back up with cold exposure, water contact, or even light pressure on the affected area. There are documented cases of people reporting a recurrence of acute pain 20 to 30 years after the original contact, triggered by something as small as a cold shower. Even dry, fallen leaves on the forest floor remain potent for months after falling. Horses that have inhaled airborne pollen from the plant have shown erratic, distressed behavior, sometimes requiring sedation. Dogs have suffered for weeks after brief contact with a single leaf. Local field researchers who study the species do so in thick gloves, sealed goggles, and full-face respirators, treating it less like botany and more like handling something radioactive. There's a darker historical footnote, too. During the Second World War, soldiers training in Queensland's rainforest reportedly encountered the plant, and at least one severe case has been documented as evidence of just how debilitating its effects can be cited even now by botanists studying the species as a warning for field teams working in the region. It is, by every visual measure, an unremarkable plant. That's exactly what makes it dangerous. The octopus, the size of a golf ball. In the tide pools and rocky crevices along the northern coastline lives one of the smallest and most lethal animals on the planet. The blue-ringed octopus. It's roughly the size of a tennis ball, sometimes smaller. Its camouflage is close to perfect until it feels threatened. Then, iridescent blue rings begin pulsing across its skin. A warning display that looks almost artificial, like something engineered rather than evolved. The venom it carries is tetrodotoxin, a neurotoxin roughly 1,000 times more potent than cyanide by weight that blocks nerve signal transmission throughout the body. Muscles stop responding, including the ones that control breathing. The person remains fully conscious the entire time, unable to move air in or out of their lungs on their own. There is no antidote. The only treatment is mechanical ventilation, sustained for however many hours it takes the body to metabolize the toxin out of its system, sometimes as long as 12 to 24 hours in severe cases. During that entire window, the patient is awake, aware, and completely paralyzed, unable even to blink to signal distress. The blue-ringed octopus is not naturally aggressive. It only stings defensively when it's picked up or squeezed, and its bite itself is often so small and painless that victims don't even realize they've been stung until paralysis begins to set in. The danger comes almost entirely from people mishandling it, because it looks beautiful, exotic, and critically, completely harmless. If you're finding this as unsettling as we are, hit subscribe now. We cover a new corner of the planet science still can't fully explain every single week, and you don't want to miss the ones coming after this. The national park that locks its own doors. Kakadu is one of the largest national parks on Earth, spanning around 20,000 square kilometers. And it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of only a small number of sites on the entire planet, listed for both natural and cultural significance simultaneously. The promotional photos show golden escarpments, roaring waterfalls, and vividly colored bird life. All of that is real. It's just not the whole picture. During the wet season, roughly November through April, large sections of Kakadu become physically inaccessible. Not difficult, inaccessible. Roads disappear under a meter of floodwater. River crossings that are simple dirt fords in the dry months become violent, fast-moving channels capable of sweeping away a four-wheel drive vehicle. Helipads get washed out entirely. Tourists caught unprepared have needed emergency evacuation by boat or aircraft. And that's not even the most dangerous part of the wet season. As floodwaters spread, saltwater crocodiles disperse out of the main river channels and into temporary pools that form across the plains, pools that didn't exist a week earlier and won't exist a month later. A puddle beside a road can, without warning, be a puddle with a crocodile in it. This coincides with the exact period when the park is at its most visually spectacular, waterfalls full, vegetation blooming, which is precisely when you cannot safely enter most of the water. There's a stranger layer to Kakadu too. Thousands of feral water buffalo, descendants of animals introduced in the 19th century, now roam the park by the thousands. Their trampling has physically reshaped the landscape, carving new paths to waterholes and dragging saltwater into freshwater ecosystems that took millennia to stabilize. A single introduced species has been quietly rewriting one of the most protected landscapes on the planet, and park rangers spend a significant portion of their year simply managing the fallout. The land even its own people aren't allowed to enter. West of Kakadu lies Arnhem land, roughly 97,000 square kilometers, about the size of Hungary, and almost entirely indigenous-owned land. Most Australians who don't live there have never set foot inside it, and entry for outsiders requires a formal permit that isn't always granted. Arnhem land isn't simply a protected reserve. Communities here maintain ceremonial practices believed to be thousands of years old, and certain areas within it are considered so sacred that even the traditional custodians themselves will not enter without specific ceremonial rite, passed down through specific family lines. These sites aren't marked on any public map. They're passed down orally, known only to the people who are meant to know them, and outsiders who stumble near them are quietly redirected. Scientifically, the region holds one of the highest densities of reptile species on Earth, including some of the most venomous snakes known among them, relatives of the taipan, along with substantial freshwater and saltwater crocodile populations. A 2022 survey recorded saltwater crocodile densities along parts of the Arnhem Land coast higher than anywhere else measured in Australia. In these waters, crocodiles aren't just present. They're the dominant force in the ecosystem, sitting at the very top of a food chain that most visitors never get close enough to observe. Arnhem Land is, functionally, a no-go zone for most outsiders, and that combination of restricted access, apex predator density, and deep ceremonial secrecy may be exactly why so much of it has remained scientifically undocumented for so long. Researchers who have been granted access describe entire valleys of rock art that have never been formally catalogued, where people simply disappear. Search and rescue services in northern Australia have an informal term for a specific category of case: missing in bush. The Australian bush, in this context, isn't a forest in the European sense, dense, textured, full of visual landmarks. It's often flat, repetitive vegetation. The trees look identical, same silhouette, same height, same color, for kilometers in every direction. Trails vanish underfoot within a single season of regrowth. At midday, with the sun near its zenith, there's no clear directional shadow to orient by, and the heat is constant, pulling moisture from the body far faster than most people, especially international tourists, ever anticipate. In 1998, a group of 5 young hikers set out in Litchfield Park, a popular tourist destination just a short drive from Darwin, known for its waterfalls and swimming holes. They left the marked route. 3 managed to find their way back. 2 were located days later, suffering from severe dehydration, despite being only a few kilometers from a paved road the entire time. Investigators attributed it entirely to disorientation, not distance. In 2006, an experienced bushwalker, someone who had navigated this specific region for years, not a novice, vanished. His footprints were traced to a riverbank. Nothing further was ever found. No body was recovered. What happened has never been officially determined, and the case remains listed as unresolved. This is, in a strange way, the quietest danger on this list. No teeth, no venom, no wind speed. Just space, heat, and the human tendency to overestimate how easily we can find our way back once the landscape stops looking familiar. A land that tries to cook you alive. Push south from the top end, and the danger changes shape entirely. Northern Australia's interior bleeds into the red center deserts, like the Simpson and the Tanami, where summer temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius, and the ground itself can climb past 60. There is functionally no shade for enormous stretches. Water exists only at specific known points, sometimes hundreds of kilometers apart. An unprepared person without water in these conditions can lose consciousness within a matter of hours, not days. People disappear here almost every year, not through recklessness, but because a vehicle breaks down in a stretch with no mobile signal, no passing traffic, and no way to call for help. Rescue teams sometimes don't begin a search until a person is already a day or more overdue, by which point the odds have shifted dramatically. And yet, remarkably, this is one of the most biologically rich desert environments on Earth. Australia's arid interior supports a greater diversity of reptile species than any other desert region on the planet. Dozens of endemic lizards and snakes that exist nowhere else, having evolved mechanisms to survive in conditions that would kill most vertebrate life within a day. One species has skin structured to funnel condensation and morning dew directly toward its mouth through microscopic channels. Between its scales, a passive water harvesting system that predates human engineering by millions of years. It's a landscape defined by 2 extremes existing at once, a place capable of killing an unprepared human faster than almost anywhere else in the country, and simultaneously, one of the most inventive laboratories of survival biology anywhere on the planet. The 65,000-year secret. Here is the part of this story that reframes everything else on this list. The indigenous peoples of northern Australia have lived continuously in this landscape for more than 65,000 years. That means their ancestors arrived here while modern humans were only beginning to move beyond Africa. It makes this the longest unbroken cultural tradition documented anywhere on Earth, roughly 10 times longer than written language has existed, and around 30 times older than the pyramids of Giza. Numbers that are, honestly, difficult for the mind to hold on to properly. Across those 65,000 years, An extraordinary body of survival knowledge accumulated which plants heal and which kill, when the rains will arrive, where water can be found during drought, which stretch of coastline is safe and which one isn't. Almost none of it exists in written form. It lives in oral tradition, in song, in story, in ceremony, passed from one generation directly into the next, generation after generation, without a single break in the chain. One of the most remarkable expressions of this is what's often referred to as songlines, or dreaming tracks, a navigation system where specific routes across the continent are encoded directly into song. A particular song describes a particular sequence of landmarks, a rock formation, a water hole, a ridge line, in the exact order a traveler would encounter them. If you know the song, you know the route, with no map and no compass, and this system once covered the entire continent with functional accuracy, allowing safe travel across thousands of kilometers of some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. And here's the part that should genuinely concern anyone paying attention. Much of this knowledge is disappearing in real time. Elders who carry it are aging. Younger generations are increasingly moving into urban centers, away from the specific country each piece of knowledge is tied to. Knowledge accumulated continuously for 65,000 years is leaving the world at the same rate. Its final human carriers are leaving it. Crocodiles and jellyfish are an immediate, visible kind of danger. This is a slower one, and arguably a far more permanent loss than any storm or predator on this list. What's buried under the water? We touched on it earlier, but it's worth sitting with for a moment on its own. Beneath Darwin Harbor, alongside the wrecks from the 1942 air raid, lie remnants of a war. Most people outside Australia barely associate with this region at all. Ships that were never raised. Metal that coral has spent 80 years quietly converting into a living reef. It's a small, strange detail in a place already overloaded. With them history and biology fusing together underwater, in a harbor that also happens to sit in one of the most cyclone-exposed stretches of coastline on the continent. Every layer of northern Australia seems to work this way. Peel back the surface of anything, a war, a species, a piece of land, and there's another layer underneath it that most people never learn about. Wrecked ships become reefs. Ancient songs become GPS systems older than any satellite. A quiet-looking shrub becomes a decades-long injury. Nothing here is quite what it first appears to be. Northern Australia doesn't pretend to be friendly, and it doesn't offer the illusion of control that most of us are used to. Every waterhole might contain a crocodile. Every ordinary-looking shrub might be capable of causing pain that outlasts a decade. Every step off a marked trail requires knowledge that most visitors simply don't have, and every open stretch of desert can turn deadly within a single afternoon. And that, in its own way, might make it one of the most honest places on Earth. Nature here doesn't make exceptions for anyone. The only real variable is knowledge and respect. The people who have called this land home for 65,000 years understood that from the very beginning, and they're still here, still carrying that knowledge, whether or not the rest of the world is paying attention. If this kind of place fascinates you as much as it fascinates us, subscribe now. We're covering a different corner of the planet. Science still hasn't fully explained, and you won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching. Stay curious and stay careful.